We are entering into a world, what's been called by the analyst Andy Krapenovich, ambiguous nuclear threats. And Iran would constitute an ambiguous nuclear threat to Israel. And it would spend the next 20 or 30 years of its existence making life in Israel intolerable. Similarly, we in the United States would have to ask ourselves, when Iran demands, say, an excise tax for oil going out of the Straits of Hormuz, or for our bases in the Fifth Fleet, or whatever sort of small demands we'd make, we'd have to ask ourselves, are we really ready to go to war against Iran for this? This is the containment scenario. This is the deterrence scenario that Roger is posing. Now, I know I'm extremely young. I'm barely 17 years old. I have no memory whatsoever of the Cold War. But I'm told by my elders that the Cold War was actually this scary thing, that some of you in this room were practicing nuclear drills, going under the tables in your desk, biting your fingernails, and driving off to the mountains in Maryland during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So this is now held up to us as a perfect model for what we should hope for in the future. Because, why? Because the price of stopping Iran is just too great for us to bear.
If you're watching us, viewing us on our global webcast,
could I come back a second,
Roger, certainly. But let me just mention one thing, and then I'll go back to you, Roger. If you're watching us, please bear with us. We have had a great many questions, and we're getting through them as quickly as we can. Roger, I was going to try to pick up on a comment that you made in your opening.
Okay.
When you were talking about the Iranian nuclear program, and I think I heard you say that it was still ambiguous. And I failed to see the ambiguity, and I wondered if you could, if it's possible to explain ambiguity.
Well,
they seem to be working very hard to develop their stockpile and enrich their uranium further, and every so often there's a comment by a significant Iranian that makes it seem as though they're getting really ready.
Services, Jason, as you know, have not determined whether the decision has been made in Iran to weaponize, to actually try to start turning this LEU into HEU. And in that sense, whether Iran wants to go a little further, wants to put itself somewhere close to a Japanese situation where it could, in theory, break out, or whether it actually wants ever to build a device, let alone a deliverable device, all those questions, I think, are still out there. And in that sense, the program, its end goal, is ambiguous. And there are, of course, the fatwas from both Khomeini and Khamenei saying that it's anti-Islamic to actually build a bomb. So I think there is a measure of ambiguity, and the Iranians play on this ambiguity. They are bazaris. They're rug merchants from the bazaar. They are tantalizing the world and all of us with the ambiguity of this program. As I said, Pakistan went from zero to a bomb in a decade. Why is this program taking so long and still as ambiguous as it is today? You know, Bret, as I said, he looks, so friendly, but he really likes the notion, I think, of war. And, I listened to that I was backstage there and listened to that ominous drum roll. And, is this really what we want? He equated Iran with deviancy, all these words we've heard. Isn't it better rather than, after all, what happened a few years ago? We thought maybe Iraq, right? We thought, well, maybe they have WMD. Yeah, probably they have WMD. Yeah, they have WMD. We decided that ambiguity, that word, was not worth dwelling on with respect to Iraq. And in we went without really much of a plan for what we would do afterward. And what happened, happened. I think it's foolish in life just to go forward without drawing any lessons whatsoever from one's actions. And I think the change you've seen from President Obama, trying to get out of Iraq, setting date in Afghanistan, punching very hard in Pakistan with the drones, he is trying and reaching out, the Cairo speech, heavy focus on Israel-Palestine. I think he's trying to get us Americans to stop thinking like Bret, to stop going to bed at night, imagining nuclear Armageddon is going to hit us tomorrow. Stop imagining that Iran is going to have a deliverable nuclear weapon 4 years from now. Stop imagining that all is dark and doomsday and that drum roll you heard is really the world we're marching into, and say, hey, here we are at the dawn of the 21st century. Maybe we can make this century a little better than the last one. And maybe, however difficult it is, with Iran, with whom for 31 years we've been in this situation of absolute paralysis, maybe we can do what we did with a former enemy in Beijing. If you look at the Shanghai communique, what does it say? It says the United States and China agree on absolutely nothing, zero, except one thing, that it's better to have contacts, have relations, and try and deal with our difficulties that way than not to have them. And he's right, ladies and gentlemen, still, instead of inviting us all to that nuclear nightmare scenario that Bret seems so enamored of for some reason, to say there is an alternative.
Roger, thank you. I'm tempted to join this debate, but that's not my role. Please, Bret.
Just very briefly, I'm amused at the laugh line that I'm the warmonger on this stage. What I'm trying to do, very simply, is say that a regime that calls for the annihilation of Israel and denies the Holocaust should not be allowed under any circumstances to acquire the means by which they can annihilate Israel and perpetrate a second Holocaust. How that makes me... Roger has this wonderful caricature that I'm this young man enamored by war. This is baloney. This is ridiculous.
Well, you see me as an aging pacifist,
what I am trying to say, and by the way, taking out through military strikes nuclear facilities in Iraq, Esfahan, Natanz, and Qom is not sending the 3rd Infantry into Tehran. Let's just make that distinction.
No,
very
I'm
clear.
sure it would be forgotten about the next day.
No, but
it would be a minor incident.
1 second.
No, it would be a major incident, and it could be. And I hope it doesn't come to that. I hope the Iranians can be dissuaded from their course before it comes to that. But should it,
I
come
believe
to
they
that,
can be.
Well, that's very happy thinking. Against the evidence of an uninterrupted year of mistaken predictions from Roger, you're on a roll. Let me add another one, because this gets to something that's sort of in the air. Nixon went to China, right? So if America could have made peace with this Red China that was indeed vastly more brutal and violent than the Islamic Republic is, after 25 years of enmity, after sticking up for Taiwan all these years, why can't Obama go to Tehran, so to speak? The answer is the invitation hasn't been issued. And why hasn't the invitation been issued? You know, it's worth reading Kissinger's memoirs and seeing that when, an American ping pong team showed up somewhere, the Chinese played them. There were signals. There was clearly a willingness on the part of Mao to open to the West. It wasn't Nixon going to China so much as it was Mao opening to the West. And he did so in large part because there was an enemy he feared even more than the United States. And that enemy was the Soviet Union, with which he was at perpetual daggers drawn. Now, it would be lovely to imagine some scenario, I don't know which one exists. There are certain analysts out there in Washington who would love the United States and Iran to team up against Israel and make that the common enemy. God forbid that should ever happen. But so far, this analogy that Roger, this very shop-worn analogy that Roger uses and a lot of other people use, has just no basis in fact. We have been trying to engage with Iran not just for the last year, not just for 4 years during Bush's second term, but throughout the Clinton administration. You remember something happened, birthday cakes were sent during the Reagan administration. The late Carter administration tried to engage with Khomeini. Every single time it failed. So why is it that we are urged on a course that has failed so repeatedly? I mean, this is something for Roger to explain.
Let's break and go to a question. Actually, several questions have been coming into us from our audience and from the global webcast at ajc.org. How worried should we be by Iranian international influence, whether supporting terrorism in the Middle East or making alliances with authoritarian regimes in Latin America or elsewhere? Whether making alliances with authoritarian leftist regimes in Latin America, we can think of one in particular, but not just one. The degree to which we should be focusing in this discussion, this debate, on Iran's international influence. How to check Iran's international influence. Further engagement?
I think we should worry about, I mean, this is the international, this is the great game, right? We try to extend our influence, they try to extend their influence, and we should try to check their influence, limit, restrain, curtail their influence wherever we can. Should we be in a high state of alarm and not sleeping at night because Hugo Chavez and Ahmadinejad like to embrace each other? No. Should we worry that relations have improved between Iran and Bolivia or Iran and Eritrea? No. Clearly, Iran's links with Hezbollah and Hamas are much more worrying. And where we can check and limit their interests, we should. I think the President, again, has done some intelligent things. Bret, no doubt, thinks it was a lousy idea for us to send an ambassador back to Damascus in Syria. I don't. I think it's a good idea. The Iranian-Syrian relationship is an important one, and if we can talk to Syria about peace in the Middle East, and if we have an ambassador there, that's a good thing. It all depends, how you think this game should be played. Bret favors confrontation wherever he can find it. I favor trying to bring change through other ways.
Bret?
I'm glad you mentioned Syria. It's a wonderful, somewhat secondary test case of the Obama engagement hypothesis. You'll remember just a few years after they blew to bits Rafiq al-Hariri and 20 other people, but of course that's all forgotten. A decent interval, as Roger likes to put it, has since passed. There was this belief, especially among incoming members of the Obama State Department, that Syria could be pulled away out of the Iranian orbit. This was one of these aspects of the brilliant diplomacy that apparently nobody had ever thought of until, Martin Indyk or whoever came around. This is what we do. We make it clear that we want a new relationship with Syria. Nancy Pelosi goes over there. John Kerry makes a visit. We offer to send, or in fact we are sending an ambassador. And what happens last February 25th? Ahmadinejad goes to Damascus, in which he says, once again, that we should look forward to the annihilation of the State of Israel, or maybe called it the Zionist microbe, or whatever sort of Der Strömer, hold on, whatever Der Strömer terminology is. And Bashar Assad says, yes, the period of American colonialism has to end and they need to pack their bags. So this is the sort of signal that the Syrians have been sending us while we're trying to engage. And again, I get back to the point, at some point you have to treat these regimes as not being totally idiotic or confounding or mysterious, that they actually might mean what they say. Assad, both the son and the father, have been playing this game with the West going on for more than 30 years. They create problems and they say that they offer to solve it solve those problems for us, then they create them again, so forth and so on. So again, another perfect illustration of the abject failure of the course that Roger has been advocating for the past year.
Yeah, peace processes never work. That's what Bret believes. Ahmadinejad goes to Kabul and is received by Karzai. No doubt he thinks we should withdraw the U.S. ambassador to Afghanistan in protest. President Lula of Brazil is going to Tehran on May 15. No doubt, Bret, we should break off diplomatic relations with Brazil and possibly threaten Brazil. This, as you will discover, is not the way the world works.
Gentlemen, go ahead. You get a final rejoinder here.
No, I mean, I just find it amusing, again. You'll remember back in 2003, just before the war, the administration, then Bush administration, was desperately trying to cobble together a final authorizing sanctions resolution. And you saw Colin Powell with all these tiny countries that happen to have a rotating seat